Welcome to Leadership Actually. It's not love, it's leadership.
Yeah,
Welcome,
exactly.
Lisa Powney.
Welcome, Lee Rogers. How are you?
I am really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good busy.
Yeah, not busy.
No, a good busy. Positive stuff. But I'm really excited about a big thing next year, you know.
Can you reveal?
I'll give you a snippet.
Go on
I
then.
love a snippet.
Yeah.
So
on,
I'm
tease us.
planning a mass charity event for next year.
Mass?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's
Can
big.
you say who it's for?
I'm a trustee of a charity.
Yeah.
And the proceeds will be for them. But I'm hoping that many, many more people get involved and they can do a bit for their charity as well. But it's really exciting. If it comes off, I'd be glowing from ear to ear.
Nice. And you are anyway. But
Yeah, but you know, we love a good cause.
we do love a good cause. We talked about it yesterday, didn't we?
We did,
We
we did.
love a good cause. So I'm really excited for you. I'll get involved, you know what it is.
Yes.
I'll get involved.
Yes.
You know, I'll just go with it.
It might be done in Lycra.
Oh
You
my
good with
God, I'm not. No, can I take it? Retract.
No.
Retract.
It's on the.
And
it's
is
on
there a
the
bike?
vision.
Oh, it might be a bike if it's in
Oh,
bike.
it
Oh, I've got to retract totally. I'll wave you on. No,
Thank you. So how are you?
Do you know what, Lee? I'm good, but I have had a bit. I like to do the vulnerable bit. I have had a bit of bad news this morning, actually.
Oh, no.
Yeah, my mum's really good family friend has passed away. So it's just made me reflect on a little cry this morning because he was such an amazing man. He was a lovely man. I think he'd been ill for a little while. But he is such a part of my story, you know, like growing up story. And so he reminded me of my mum, and he always used to check in on Facebook and, you know, hurrah. And he's from Wales, so he's a Cardiff man. And so, yeah, it was quite a bit sad this morning. Thank you.
Sorry for your loss. Really
Yeah.
am.
But, yeah, so these things happen, don't they, as part of the day. But other than that, things good. Life is good. Fred's good. So, yeah. I'm busy, good busy. I was a bit busy for a little while, so I had to calm it down and follow my own advice. So, yeah, good busy. And I'm very excited about today.
Are you?
Yeah.
Why? Why are you
So
excited
you
about
knew,
today?
no, our guest.
Our
Very
guest.
excited.
Let's introduce Wayne Clarke.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome, Wade.
Thank you very much. To be honest, I forgot I was even here for that. I was just enjoying listening to you chat
Have
and
a
so
little
sad about
chit-chat.
your family friend.
Thank you, Wade.
So, do you want to introduce Wayne?
Yeah, I will. I've got this, Wayne. This is the official. Wayne runs the World Class Manager, which is a programme in 40 countries. I had to read my own writing. And you're the founding partner of the Global Growth Institute. Have I missed anything else?
Sounds good.
Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Oh, good. And so real guru in the leadership space. This is leadership, actually. It's really exciting for us to hear this because there's lots of grounded in research.
Yeah.
So it's not just any old program you brought together. You've put some real foundations and credibility in what do our leadership or management population need on a global level, and bringing some of that. So that's really exciting about, you know, the people will want to hear about that. But when we never just start with the nice questions, because this is a bit of a messy class, because we're really messy. That's why we started. So the people we look after, you know, quite a tough time sometimes. You know, the leaders out there, or the HR directors, or you know, the people leaders out there. And things aren't perfect, and we fall over all the time, metaphorically, and I do really. So we like to start with that. So I'm going to ask you a question.
Right.
What's one unexpectedly human moment that you've had as a leader or in this journey that surprised you or caught you off guard, and maybe when you learnt something?
Well, there's been quite a lot, I'd say, over the years. And because we get the opportunity, and I get the opportunity to interact with so many shapes and sizes of organisations, so many different leaders, from the sort of, you know, as I would argue often, from the deeply empathetic or empathic leader who absolutely loves people, through to the clinical psychopath on the other side of the scale, which is true. You know, from every shape and size of person. So we get to see a lot and experience a lot. There was a time I was working with, they're a finance company. I won't say where, I try and keep this super anonymous. And I had about, I'd say maybe 25 of the different leaders there. And as I'm speaking to this group, there was these two guys at the front of the room, and one of them kept talking to the other. So I don't know how you feel if you're talking to a group of people and two people keep talking to each other. It starts to concern you.
It does. What's going on?
Potentially annoy you, maybe even. Right. So as they're talking, I'm thinking, what are they talking about? And then you start to conclude, well, this probably is about me. You start to run these sort of insane mind tricks on yourself. And then the worst thing happened, that one of them took out a piece of paper and a pen, wrote a note on it, and handed it to the other, who looked at it, laughed, and put it in his pocket.
Oh, that's school days.
School day stuff. So now my mind's run off. This is all about me. Oh my God, blah blah blah. And then what I said to myself was, what he's wrote on that piece of paper is he wrote, "Wayne is an awesome speaker," with a smiley face.
Yeah.
Right? Because I thought to myself, I'm never going to know what's on the paper, right?
No.
And I've got a choice.
Yeah.
I can either think to myself that this is something really negative, and it's about me, and which would make me feel terrible now because I've still got like half an hour's worth of talking to do, or I make it a positive thing that he wrote, "I'm awesome," because I'm never going to ask him what was on the paper, but I can choose to believe whatever I want. And I thought, I'm going to believe that. And actually, it was one of those things where I've been through experiences where you're talking to audiences and you want to try and deliver the best possible experience for people, make sure that they're engaged and that they get something out of it. Yeah. And a big part of what I'd learned through this particular moment is that it has everything to do with how you're seeing yourself, and the stories in your head are all made up by you.
Yeah.
And you react to the stories you make up, which is the most insane part about it. And someone said to me, the sort of, the signs of madness, right? The first sign is talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Second sign is having an argument with yourself.
Yeah.
And third and final sign is losing the argument.
That's
when you're done. But I thought so much of this is about what's going on inside. And it had been something of an insight that I used a lot actually in public speaking over the years to start to separate out what's actually happening versus in reality versus what I'm making it mean. So it was a moment, but I learned a lot from that and reflection.
I love that way. That's I can feel that story. I can see it happening. Those kind of things. And actually, you've touched on public speaking, which is probably one of the top fears out there from our leadership population.
Yeah.
Just on that, just to add in, there's a brilliant leader called Penny Ferguson, and she runs The Living Leader, and she always told me a story about that, slightly different but similar theme. And she said she was really fearful about going to speak to someone, and she was in a taxi ride to go and do this speech about some potions or something that she was selling, and she got
like
really fearful.
It's
kind of, and she got really fearful. And anyway, someone in the taxi driver said, like, "Why are you focusing on you?
Yeah,
it's got nothing to do with you. Yeah. It's about the audience and what you can give to the audience. It's not." They won't be thinking about you, like they won't care. But you've already told yourself about all the anxieties or where you're going to mess up and all the negative self-talk.
Yeah.
That just resonate with what you said, but a slightly different take.
There's a lovely poem called The Indispensable Man. I posted it on LinkedIn a while ago. And it says that what you do in an organisation if you feel like you're going to be missed. So it says take a bucket of water, and what you do is you put your hand in, and then you whip your hand out, and the hole that's left is how much you'll be missed inside an organisation. I just thought it's a fantastic analogy because you build so much importance around yourself and who you are and what you've done, which it matters to you, but to most other people it means zero, right? So, but it's a great starting point for every organisation you work with because you have to rebuild that credibility all the time, and you can't rely on the fact that they might have heard of something you've done before or been experienced with. It means nothing to people.
Yeah, and actually we know that rationally, but it still surprises us. It surprised me a number of times, the leaders I speak to that leave and that grief, and, I put all that into that, and then, what's happened. But it is a really good lesson to know. I like that. That's
great. Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it?
It is a really powerful. I mean, it's part of what I'm quite addicted to. I think I love the idea when we pitch up in a new country. It's nothing more exciting for me that you're somewhere new. Nobody knows who you are.
Yeah.
Nobody knows any of your backstory. And much of your backstory that holds value here has zero value anywhere else. So all of it has to be built based on their connection with you, how they feel about you in that moment, and then building those relationships. So, and it's like a sort of proving to yourself time and time again that you can do it and go to somewhere brand new and do it all over again.
Yeah.
I quite like that moment where it's that feeling what you get where you're literally at base camp.
Absolutely.
Ground zero.
I mean, and to do that in one country, Wayne, is impressive. To do that in 40 countries is phenomenal.
I'm an addict.
God, you are honest.
What does it look like when it's at its finest, like building those relationships?
I think we're trying to make impact with what we're doing. So the point of what we're creating and what we're building and what we've been building over the years is trying to find a way to take something that's relatively straightforward and simple. You know, and the greatest compliment I like is when people say, "Oh my God, this is not rocket science." I said, "You're correct. This is definitely not rocket science. This is unbelievably simple." What we found though is a delivery mechanism that makes it work in a particular way. That's just what we think, you know, is the value for what we bring. So the reason why we created that in the first place was to do something that has like a big impact. Because what I wanted to do, you know, with what we're building is do something that has impact at national scale, potentially, you know, maybe global, right? But has a big impact for people in a positive way, of course. So that's why I think the reason why we've done it in the way that we do, and I think that's the exciting part of it, is to find a way to be able to make that connection happen, so people see the value in it, and therefore it has mass impact.
And we're going to dive in. We're going to dive into what that is in a minute. But I want to go back to your backstory, because I know we've had a little conversations.
Yeah.
We even talked about your name. But what is your backstory? How have you? I've introduced you formally, but how have you got to where you are today and doing what you're doing?
It depends how far you want to go back. I'm the son of an immigrant. I don't know. I mean, I think family-wise, or let's go professional. And semi-professional, actually.
Well,
we'll talk a bit
like
about both.
both.
It's actually the origin, before I even got into anything to do with business, or even began to study anything to do with business, was music. So I wanted to be a rapper.
Wow.
So I was signed to a rap label when I was like 16 years old.
Amazing.
Run DMC, quite a famous rap group,
I know.
was signed to a particular label, and I got signed by them when I was 16.
Wow.
So my ambition from the beginning was to be a rapper. That was the plan.
Wow, Wayne, I've rapped at work, so maybe we need to talk after.
Get him on.
So rap music was the thing, right?
Yeah.
So and then we released a couple of songs, and we had like an EP that came out. And then it was the time to sort of apply to university. And I was thinking, which one do I do? And like, you know, I had a conversation with my parents at the time saying, you know, you've got to think about which one you want to do. So I decided that university was going to be the route forward.
Yeah.
And then I studied money banking and finance as a degree, which then I changed to economics degree.
Yeah.
Left and then went to work for a company called Arthur Andersen, which was a large accountancy company.
Yeah.
I spent about 3 years there, and then I spent the rest of my time in professional service firms for about 12 years, which for me, and like, you know, I would advise my daughter's now, my oldest daughter is in her final year of A-levels.
Yeah.
I think for anyone, you know, choosing a career, I think the accountancy firms, if you're lucky enough to get into one of them, I think they're fantastic places to go, because the world opened up. I saw so much, learned so much, not just about the world of business, but, you know, how to build networks, client relationships, service delivery, all the things that make a great company great. Early on, did that for a number of years, then spent about 5 years of my life analysing employee feedback and giving that feedback to organisations leaders.
Yeah.
Which was again a wonderful part of the journey, because you get to see every shape and size of organisation. And then I became quite ambitious about what we learned in a lot of companies, and thought about how can we apply this both to large complex organisations but also to governments. And if I sort of make the connection back again,
Yes.
my dissertation at university sounds a bit boring, but it was on the impact of it was the impact of developing of companies on the economic development of developing nations.
Wow.
So, and specifically looking at multinational corporations, and spent a long time looking at things like IMF loan reports, World Bank, stuff like that. I was quite fascinated by how countries were impacted by multinationals. And one of the big things I looked at was skills transfer. So it tended to be that skills transfer in most situations wasn't that good. Most top jobs get taken by expats. And then you could argue, in terms of the value that's left when the corporation leaves, was questionable in many cases.
Yes.
But the skills transfer part and knowledge transfer was always really interesting. And plus I got to work, when I joined Arthur Andersen, or Deloitte as it became, I got to work with some brilliant knowledge management professionals at a moment in time where knowledge management as a discipline was like super hot, like late 90s. So I got to see that at that lovely point in its journey and in my personal journey. I think that inspired me quite a lot of how to look at mass skills transfer.
Yes.
So I think then when I combined what we'd learnt about this manager problem in all organisations, combined with what I'd learnt with mass skills transfer, combined with what that could do for economic development, Like it was like sort of I never really put it together like that in my mind, but it was the marriage of those three things in a way that gave our ability to see what we're doing now was something that could work, and that would have potential big impact.
And did that have a personal mission as well? So, you know, you saw some of those things and you're really interested and you'd learned that curiosity, but was it a pull for you as well personally, you know, that you're inspired? Was there anything driving that as well?
I'd say yeah, and the main reason I'd say yes is because it's about speed. So I think, you know, you get arguing on lifespans, but I think the last stats I looked at for men and women, this was in England and Wales, men were 79.1, I think it was, and women were 81 point something. So you're doing better than us.
Yeah.
But life expectancy is short. You know, you've got so much time, and I think, you know, we've replicated problems around the world that don't need to be replicated. You know, if you look at something as simple as going from fixed line telecoms to mobile in many developing countries, there's no need to go through that whole journey. You can get there much faster. And I think, you know, we've learned in business so much, and we unlearn and relearn so much which is unnecessary.
Yeah.
So like the learning cycle, I think, can be sped up massively, and which has a huge impact on economic development. There's no need for a country to go through, you know, if you think we've gone from arguing that knowledge management as a great discipline in the mid-90s to now what it looks like, there's no need for a country to go through 30 years of that. You can probably get there in like less than a year. So a big part of my drive is speed.
Yes.
You know, and how can we speed up learning and knowledge transfer and skills development, because it can be done much faster than is probably thought.
Love that. And that kind of ethos of consultancy and great facilitation as well. You know, they take and digest all the things that have happened and experienced, and then actually then accelerate the next, you know, person's speed or the next organisation's speed. So yeah, love that.
Brilliant. And then obviously you've had a huge successful programme with World Class Manager. How long have you been running that now?
Well, next year's going to be our 10th year, so we launched in 2016. We'd had the programme in sort of development for a couple of years before, but we launched with the platform and everything else in 2016. So 10 years next year.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
congratulations.
That's amazing. And how's it, you've clearly talked about the benefits and how you've drawn everything together. Have you made it really stick and be sustainable over that 10 years?
The main thing, I'd argue, is it's, as I mentioned before, it's unbelievably simple and straightforward in the way that we designed the process, mainly because we were careful and caring about the lack of time people have. So, you know, the modern manager, not even manager, the modern person is just totally strapped for time. And as we know, our attention spans are sort of shot to death all the time as well. So we designed it in a way that was easy to follow and easy to implement and easy to learn from in its process. In terms of the content, it was all based on stuff that actually works. So nothing that anyone encounters in any part of the program was like a theory that we sat and thought, this would be good. Here's an interesting hypothesis. None of that. You know, it's all based on practical stuff that works from observing great managers in action and great managers, you know, that we've encountered around the world. You know, regardless of whether we're in, you know, Vietnam or Brazil or wherever, it tends to be that most of what we found tends to be largely about the same, pretty much about everywhere.
So the obvious question is, what makes a world-class manager?
Well, we've got a bunch of things that we think now, but there are, I'd argue, you know, 5 to 10 main things based on what we found that tend to be consistent. And if you tested it in the sense of if you actually did those things, then it tends to be that things would get better. So, you know, I don't know if I can list them all, if you want me to list them all, but there are sort of, you know, 12 things in our core program, and we focus on, I'll touch on a couple. The first is what we call being a 21st century manager. And the reason why we looked at that is because hardly any organisations, large or small, reinvestigate the role of the manager. So the role of the manager evolves over time. You need somebody in there to look after, could be other members of the team, products, processes, client relationships, whatever it might be. And often that evolves out of survival because the organisation has to survive. And it's very rare that a company would say, right, you know, we've got 100 managers or we've got 1,000 managers. Let's go and reinvestigate, because we're in November 2025, what the role of the manager is to do. They never do that because it's out of survival, and the manager evolves over time, rightly or wrongly, in a way like sort of, it's a Darwinian process of manager development. Whereas if you said to most CEOs, as the question I like to ask is, if you could restart this company again from scratch today, right now, and hire these 100 managers, would they be doing what they're already doing in the company? And most CEOs, if not all of them, would say, no, I'd have them do something different. And why don't you have them do something different? Well, we've not really thought about doing it that way, or it's painful to do so, or we maybe feel like it's being taken care of by somebody else. And everyone feels like it's being taken care of by somebody else, which means no one's taking care of it. So there isn't a conscious development of the role of the manager. So we looked at what we call being a 21st century manager, and we get managers to, in a way, personally investigate what's their job. Like, why would you be in there as a manager?
Yeah.
And in some cases it's quite straightforward. I've been here longer than you, I sold more stuff than you, or you sold more stuff than me. People like you more than they like me. They play golf with Lee, not with Wayne. And there's all these sort of weird reasons why people get put into manager roles, often not consciously chosen by the organisation or by the individual. So that's an important one. Modules, what we call modules, but module number 2 and 3 focuses on the quality of the one-to-one. It's what we call great goal-setting conversations and inspiring appraisal conversations. We think that has probably the biggest impact on everything, from performance, individually, team-based, organisationally, commercially, for most organisations. And if you then track back to, of all the companies we've come across, and I can share maybe some examples, when we get into the quality of the one-to-one, it tends to be that if you've got a high frequency and high quality one-to-ones happening, it tends to be performance takes care of itself in most organisations. And I've realised why. Not because the quality one-to-one means anything. What it actually means for the organisation is that you tend to have a better throughput of messaging, communication, and the organisation itself stays much more agile, like an organism, right, in a way that's refreshing itself about what reality is. So in the better leadership teams we come across, they tend to have a higher frequency of interaction, surprise, surprise, than the ones that don't do so well. And it's just like as an SME, or even take it smaller as a micro company, you live and die and pay your mortgage based on income, if you're a freelancer, for example, based on delivery. The further you get away from that delivery, the more mysterious the whole thing might look, and you make poor decisions. So often you've got quite disconnected leadership teams who are disconnected from the action, but their method of rechecking reality is quite limited. So because they don't get together very often, and even when they do, it's the agenda is set by other people. So in one particular organisation we worked with, we were fascinated to see that the leadership team meet every single Monday morning, and it's a global business, every Monday morning. So in a way, that company doesn't go more than 7 days without rechecking reality, whereas most other leadership teams aren't talking with that level of frequency.
And you talked before about distraction and time span and time poor. What's one of the first things that often goes in a organisation is one-to-ones, because people are going, I've got stuff to do.
Yeah, I've got no time.
And that debate around, well, actually, what is your role as a leader?
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Lisa, have you come across this? I'm sure you have, when it's almost a hybrid role between the doing and the leader role. And you touched on about being reluctant leaders. The amount of subject matter experts I've come across in leadership roles is probably about 80%.
Yeah.
Where it's absolutely an add-on to what their core is.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time they don't even enjoy it.
Well, it's the only reason that often the organisation can justify things like paying you more money. Yeah. Like, you've got to have a team. Oh, I don't want a team.
Yeah.
But you need one, because I can't justify the 20% uplift if you're not managing people. Or it's archaic and idiotic in many cases of how this transition happens. And if you do accept that it has to happen because there's no other mechanism to justify that outcome, then at least make the transition valuable, in the sense that how much preparation is given for that transition. So many people tell me the same story. I was promoted on Friday, and then made manager as of Monday of the same team that I was in on Friday, which is the most horrific transition that you can probably go through. Because then on Monday the team are like, all right, come on then, mate, manage us.
Yeah.
Horrible position to be in. But many organisations don't prepare managers for that transition. Or if they do, it's too late. They've been a manager for a couple of years, they've been through the pain, and now they're offered a management training program. Part of what we created was that, in theory, you could be given this program over the weekend, and you're not coming on Monday, the finished article, but in a much better position than had you not had the education.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important. I mean, I remember doing a program where we did future-ready leaders. So we got a pipeline of leaders that we'd taken through, and in theory they were on the bench that they could then be picked up. The reality was slightly different, actually, because then when you came to recruitment, they still chose the person who they wanted, that they got on with, or they played golf with, or whatever. So, you know.
Yeah. But it tends to be the case, isn't it? Like in terms of the likability of somebody, that's a huge impact, a huge factor in it. And probably the likability is a big issue because people don't like painful things.
No.
And if it feels easier, it's much more likely that that's the path, because people choose the path of least resistance, right? It's like we look at in sort of, you know, economic studies, you look at the basic principle that human beings are what we call wealth maximizers. So I'm going to choose the best possible situation for me right now in this moment. But even in the way I'm sitting, I'm going to choose the most comfortable option because I want this to be the best situation right now. So you wealth maximize, whether that's about your environment or whether your finances.
Yeah, okay.
So I think it's a fascinating thing of then how that plays out in who you choose. This feels like an easier option, but actually it might be a more costly option because you made the wrong decision. It's another issue.
It is, yeah. People choose people they like. They want to be around the people that they like. And that has whole other implications for collaboration and diversity and inclusion and all those different things. I love what you talk about, you know, and I see a lot of that in our leadership space. So what do you think, you know, if they went over the weekend in theory and went on your workshop, what kind of simple habits might they start doing on the Monday? What sort of the key things? And you know, you talked about one-to-ones, but what might be different?
Well, an immediate one for people will be time. So like of all of the things that we talk about, time is by far, and we have a particular module called Optimizing Your Time, which is about how to utilize and use your time more effectively. We're not saying better because who are we to judge that, but we think there are probably optimum ways to utilize time and techniques and things that you can learn, such as that for most people, they probably wouldn't spend much time consciously thinking about what's going on in the team, how that links to the organization's strategy, to the goals. You know, if you want to become more senior in any organization, being seen to be more of a strategic thinker and manager and leader is never going to be a bad thing. Most managers will say, which is quite true, I just don't have the time to do that. I would like to do that, but don't have the time to do it. So for example, it might be, as a practical tip, I would imagine that most people's diaries for the next few weeks is busy. Most people's diaries in 3 months' time is less busy. So, you know, maybe in 3 months' time, you put half a day a week in your diary and you keep that time sacrosanct and you reinvest that time into either that's personal development, understanding the company strategy a bit more, could be the finances, could be key stakeholders, whatever you want to do, but something that adds value to you first and foremost, because you've got to be intrinsically motivated to do it, unless you're, you know, one of the small percentage of people who are truly, genuinely altruistic, which is a small percentage of people, but most people act out of selfish interest. So find something that's going to be a payoff for you and utilise the time in a different way. And then rethink, you know, you could look over the last 3 months of your diary and say, right, how have I utilised my time? Could there have been smarter ways? Could there be some things I let go of, get out of, stop doing? You know, I actually I'm a regular pollster of useful, hopefully, and sometimes useless questions on LinkedIn. But one of the questions I put up last week about meetings was I talked about any other business, because it's one of the most painful things I often find personally being in a meeting and you get to the end and then someone says, right, any other business? You're like, no, no.
Ban the any other business.
I'm out of here because this can now be another hour's worth of rubbish. You know, so I put the poll up I put up was, what's more painful, any other business or stubbing your toe? And 75% said any other business is more painful than stubbing your toe. Stubbing your toe is painful.
Yeah.
It really hurts. But any other business is even more painful than that.
Because we don't know what it's going to be.
It lasts a long last.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true. You're over a stubbing in a couple of minutes, aren't you?
I think though that is a really good tip. You know, time over and over again. You know, that stops people in their court before you even started. Well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to fit some of that stuff in. And thinking a bit more about of investment and energy, I think, is a really good part. I know we interviewed a lady who talked about finances, and it's kind of the same thing. You know, if you don't look at your finances and you don't understand where you're spending your money, nothing changes. You just continue to be in that spiral. You have to sit and audit it and go, you know, where is this going so I can make a change? And it's the same with time, but we don't
100%.
stop, do we, and go, right, I'm going to audit that and see what's going to go on. So I think that's a really good start and a reset. And start as you mean to go on as well is a really good part. I'm really interested though, over those 10 years, have those key habits or the things that you now teach people changed? And are you thinking about the future and else they might need to be bringing in?
Yeah, we took quite a deep look as we went through sort of the lockdown pandemic at what was evolving, changing in the role of the manager. And we developed an additional 12 modules in the program, which are, I wouldn't call them more advanced, but I'd call them more evolved topics of management that you'll probably recognise when you've managed teams or projects or things for a while. So things like more emotional intelligence. So we've got what we call emotionally intelligent leadership. We've got a module on moving from manager to leader. We've got a module called being the CEO, which tries to put you in the mindset of how the CEO might be looking at this whole thing. So again, there are things that you'll probably recognise once you've been at it for a few years would matter. The book that came out for us in 23, which is ironically called How to Become a World-Class Manager, was based on the original 12 of the programme. And the interesting discussions we had with Kogan Page, our publishers, was great. So that they think that this will last for quite a long time, because I think much of what we touched on in the original programme has probably been a problem forever, and it will probably remain until we're like all outed by robotics and AI. It will probably remain an issue for most human interaction forever. So much of what we found in the origin is quite common, and I think that's not by mistake. We built the programme based on real input globally of what people wanted rather than what we thought they needed, which is a very different approach. Our latest application of this approach is what we call World-Class HR, which launches actually in 26.
Interesting.
So we've done the same thing. We've looked at, based on all of the input, like based on manager input, if the managers were going to design a world-class HR person, HR leader, what would they say they need to focus on? So we've taken all of that input and we've got a program which is now designed for HR leaders but built by managers. So hopefully we think we've got a very unique take on what the HR world need.
Oh, brilliant. That's really exciting. A lot of our listeners are HRDs or HR leaders. So what were the kind of things that were coming out for them? What do they need to be thinking about?
Well, there's things that you would probably expect through like the employee life cycle. So from recruitment to retention to employee engagement, stakeholder engagement was a big area. Looking at their own development is another big area. And I think a large one we think is for most HR teams, they represent a very unique part of the organisation that no one else has an opportunity to do. So there's very few teams where you've got that freedom in a way to explore the organisation, to add value across the entire organisation. But often most HR teams in our experience, and certainly the more junior you become in the team, often you can become quite disconnected from what the strategy is. And the reason why understanding the strategy would be a smart idea was because obviously you're going to be seen to be much more valuable if you understand the strategy. If you understand how the organisation actually makes money, would really help. How it creates impact for its stakeholders if it's a non-profit or third sector organisation. And sometimes, not just in HR, but in most other what you'd call corporate functions, you can be quite divorced from the action. Because your level of interaction with the customer, beneficiary, patient, if it's a NHS trust, can be quite divorced because you're not in that role. So, again, we touched on some of the elements in there which we think are key. And like most, whether you're a manager or HR leader, I think with most managers, the thing that we focus on quite a lot is trying to be as clear as possible about what it is that you want. So, I love the saying that human beings are hard workers, but they're often really bad askers. Right? So, most people will work quite hard. Most people are quite rational and willing to do a great job. Not many people are clear about what it is that they actually want. I think it's one of the hardest questions in life to answer. My mum jokes, she's 71. She won't like me for exposing her age, but she jokes and says she doesn't know what she wants to do when she grows up. And it's like, we have a joke about it, but I don't think many people are clear about what they want. And if you think about that at work, what do you want? Is it to become more senior? If so, why? Who challenges that conversation with you? So going back to my experience at Arthur Andersen, and there's a brilliant guy who is still, I would argue, a bit of a mentor and coach in many respects for me, but one of my early managers. Was exceptional. He used to have a very good conversation with me on a regular basis about what I wanted, hopes, dreams, ambitions, future, and so on, as well as another particular manager as well. And I think I grew up in the early stage of my career experiencing that type of conversation. I think, if you haven't had that type of experience, and I was just lucky, I got to meet those people early on in my career, then I think, you'd have a very different view of what a great manager conversation looks like. So they can help you to a large degree, but still you're left with the problem. It's your problem. And no one cares more about it than you would. Maybe a parent or two if you're lucky enough, but largely that's about it. And I lecture at a couple of universities And one of the things I like to talk about, certainly with undergrads and also with master's students, is, you know, no one, once you get into the workplace, is going to or should care about your future. It's a bonus if you drop lucky and get a manager like I did, who genuinely seems to care, but I wouldn't bank on it. And it's a bad strategy to bank on that. So, you know, because only you're going to answer that question. So I think, you know, as much soul searching as you can do to try and answer that question, the better.
Yeah, I've seen that over and over and experienced it personally. And I think it's not even, once you do know what you want, then you've got to ask as well, you know, and that's the next step. And, you know, and I've seen a lot with HR, you know, or HRDs, they often get so distracted with the policies and the processes and forget that actually they can be the most, they've gone through the most qualifications and the most experience in that space. And I'd often say they go in the room and ask for permission, and I go, who's the most qualified to answer? And they'll go, well, I am. Like, so why are we asking for permission? Understand what you want for the business and recommend that. And, you know, and that's part of knowing what you want and being able to ask for it. So I absolutely agree that, you know, it's a common problem in there. And maybe I thought it was a bit of a British thing, but maybe it's a human thing that we can't really articulate what we want as individuals.
I love the exploration of it, actually, and I think it resonates with what you're saying, because I don't know whether it's the exec coaching me, but there's something around a constant, you said earlier about 21st century manager, right? It's almost that constant going round for individuals to say, well, what does success look like in a given period of time, and then revisiting that, really curious and open-minded. You know, so if, for example, people listening to this have had a health scare and they've been on the corporate rat run for the last 15 years, all of a sudden they might say, well, I want health. You know, that's the thing I'm going to prioritise. Or it might be, if you're an empty nester all of a sudden, that you want freedom versus wealth. Actually, for some people, it might be, well, I want the holiday home now. You know, I want time back. I'm going to focus and prioritise on time. And I think it's different for different people, in actually my experience. But you're right, I don't think there's a really good process that people follow habitually to go, what do I want? And what does that look like to me?
I mean, I have an exercise if people want to, I like practical stuff. Here's a practical exercise, right? And it will take you about an hour with someone to do. It might sound a bit painful to some people, but here's how it works. So what you do is, with the two of you, is you spend half an hour each. You spend the first 10 to 15 minutes with a piece of paper and a pen, or any digital means of your choice, and you write out your life story, right, from beginning to end. And then what you do with each other is you sit there and you tell that person your life story. And it will probably take 15 to 20 minutes to talk it through, and for the other person to do the same. And I guarantee, it's a world-class manager, guarantee that you will emerge from that conversation with a very, you know, with a brand new perspective on the person that you may have known for 20 years. And at some point during that hour, you would say, oh my God, I never knew that you played in a band. I never knew that you did this. I never knew that you were, you know, world class at doing something. You know, there's a revelation that will happen. And it does another thing as well, is it strengthens your understanding, or builds your understanding is a better word, of why that person does what they do, why they might behave in the way that they behave, and it just creates a whole new connection with someone. So I think that, like, and I had this experience with somebody else. We went through a similar exercise, and I found it such a profound exercise to go through. Also because our story, and you mentioned about part of your story, you know, your mum's friend was a big part of your story growing up. We've all got this story, and the story that we all have matters a lot to us because it's our own personal story. And you think, when is somebody else, or when would you have an opportunity to explain that story to someone? I've been married for 30 years. My wife's not interested in this story. I'm just joking. I love my wife. Do you know what I mean? Like, I work with these people all day. They don't want to sit and hear my story. My friends, am I going to sit down and go through it? No, I'm not going to do it. But it's an odd thing. It's probably the most important story we've all got. But when would you get an opportunity to share it with somebody?
Okay.
I think the contract of, like, you know, I'll share with you mine, and if you would share with yours, I think is a nice one to go through, because you both get something out of doing it. I think in the team, you know, if I'm in your team, Lee, and you're my manager or my supervisor, team leader, if we have an opportunity for an hour to sit and do that and share each other's respective stories, it's one of the best things you can do, I think, to strengthen the relationship. You know, I mean, it's just a quick one. As we went through lockdown, I did this with strangers. So I was in my garage as everyone else was, or in the house, you know, through lockdown, and I must have read too many LinkedIn posts. I got emosh.
Totes
Totes
emotion.
emotion.
I was
That's your
totes
favourite.
emosh. And as I'm reading through this stuff, I thought, so I put out an advert on LinkedIn and said, if anyone wants to do a one-to-one, I'll do them with strangers. So we picked 10 people, and I did like 10 random one-to-ones with people I'd never met. And it's weird, you pop up on screen like, hey. And I did the same exercise, right? So I asked them to share with me their life story, and we went through, I didn't share my life story, but I got them to share their life story, and then we talked about where they go. And I'm definitely not a coach. I don't do anything like that. But I just thought as a mechanism of engagement, I was sat in there in the house, kind of bored, interact with new people. And then I realised for them, as we went through that experience, I'm reflecting back things that they realised, oh my God, of course, that's why I don't like Mary, the manager, because she reminds me of like my aunt, and I hated her, and there's all that stuff that comes out. And the reason why I don't like Mike is he has like smelly food in the office and blah, blah, blah. There's all that stuff. But I think, again, it all comes from that deeper understanding between the individual, which is key.
I am so pinching that.
And
I'm so doing that.
absolutely. I've done a version of that. I love that. It's really in depth. And the thing that strikes me, and I've heard Stephen Bartlett on LinkedIn talk about this, is around that real connection.
Yeah.
And giving people time and space. Hashtag everyone has a story. It's the one thing that everybody's got that is in common with each other.
Yeah.
So it's like a respect thing to say, whatever level you're at, and my daughter says, and I've said this before on the podcast, my daughter says, well, don't worry, Dad, because they all wee and they all poo. We're all human beings, right?
That's true.
So we've got an option to...
Apparently not. Apparently, if you look at... apparently there was a story based on... I won't say there's a particular part... But it was a documentary I watched on Netflix, so people can find it, about one of the supreme leaders of quite a dictatorial country, where they said that he'd evolved himself to such a level where he didn't need to do that anymore.
No
So
way.
people can check that out.
Wow, that's blown my
Wow, I'm
mind.
going to
for
guess
sure.
who that might be. Did he burst in the end?
I guess it's that respect thing, isn't it? It's that deeper level stuff, and it really does resonate. Particularly when we're so busy and we're so fast paced. Look, I think
I could talk to you all day.
it's absolutely flown. The producer has given us,
we're out of time.
No
5
way. Minutes warning.
Okay.
So it's been an absolute privilege, and certainly from me, thank you so much for making the effort to come in person. It means the absolute world.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I can put it into words actually. So I'm really humbled that you've chose to be here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolute privilege. I've loved speaking to you. All the things that you've talked about really matter to the people that listen. So, that's really important as well. I'm going to ask a final quick question.
Yeah, please.
You started with, you wanted to make a difference to countries globally. By doing what you're doing, have you seen some difference? Have you seen some of those changes happen?
Well, yes, and then we've got a wonderful story. In Mongolia, we think that now anywhere close to, it's probably between a quarter to a third of every single school teacher in Mongolia has been through our program, which is recrafted in Mongolia. It's essentially called World Class Mongolia, but it's about making the education system stronger and better through better management at a national level. So that's a huge impact that I could never have dreamed that we would have had. And we're about to launch tomorrow actually something in Africa where we're having a huge impact across an entire sector of arguably the second largest economy in Africa. Wow. So again, I think this is an important point if I can just shoehorn it in. Yeah. And I think at the beginning when we were starting out 10 years ago to create a management training program, I kind of had a wild loose ambition that we'd get to somewhere like that. I wouldn't have been able to define it this way, but it just shows you what impact you can have. And I think it's through the consistency of doing something that you start to open up areas and building the networks. I think we're working in a few different parts of Africa at the moment, but I've been to Egypt probably 7 times this year, which is a lot of times to go and spend some time somewhere. But I do so because I think each time you go, or each time I've been, you reveal another layer of the culture that you didn't understand. I think by trip 4, I would have sat here and confidently said, I think I've got a really good handle now on Egyptian business culture. Yeah. Trip 5, I realised I didn't understand anything. Trip 6 and 7 have got better again. And, and at each stage you sort of learn more about the culture, but the more you learn, the better you can fit the solution. Just like at the individual level, right? With a manager and a team member, the more you understand the individual, the more valuable you can design an intervention or some sort of support or guidance for them. Yeah. So I think that's been a large part of what we've tried to do, is both in making the impact, is to try and deeply understand who it is that we're trying to support.
That's absolutely phenomenal, you know, the real difference it can make. And I guess it hones back to, you know, sometimes we have the accidental lead or we fall into that role, but the difference that can make to the world, you know, they make a difference to their team and to individuals here or globally. It can make a real difference. It's not just a job, you know, it's a real profession that can change the world ultimately. And I know that sounds big and grand, but you've got the proof and it's true. Yeah. So phenomenal. Yeah. Thank you for answering that.
The very, very final question is, who should we get in that seat that you're sat in now that's really inspired you as a guest on Leadership Actually? That you can help us get there.
Okay. Someone who he's been an unbelievable friend and also mentor for me, a guy called Martin Liu. So Martin has grown and sort of developed a huge number of very successful organisations. So, you know, commercially, business-wise, he's very, very successful, but also as a human being and as a friend, I think a very, very, very special person. So Martin is based in London, so maybe we can twist his arm and see if he'd come on.
Amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
Thank you
been
so
brilliant.
much. Thank you as always for everybody listening and watching. Please share your thoughts, comments, reflections on today. Subscribe, follow wherever you watch or listen to the podcast. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And investing in us. See you next time on Leadership Actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you,
guys.
Wayne.